Let's see here. Where's my notes? Hi, everyone. For those who
Hi.
don't know me, my name. Oh, hey. My name is Jordan Reginald Aelick. I'm the library member, or the library manager and a board member for the Canada Comics Open Library. Yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for joining us for this kind of impromptu workshop. I was so inspired by everyone's workshops throughout 2021 that we watched from September onwards. Hey, Jade. It really got me thinking about comics and how much energy is involved in comic making and what we can do with that energy and all of that stuff. It's just been so inspired lately. So that's why I wanted to do this. So thanks a bunch for coming. This is kind of going to be like I called it a talk shop workshop because I'm going to be doing a bit of a lecture talking about how I got to where I am in like life and cartooning. And then maybe play some drawing games if we have enough time that are also like drawing games and lessons at the same time. But yeah, we'll see how much time we have. For those of you who haven't heard about CCAL, we are the Canada Comics Open Library. We were founded in 2018. We're completely volunteer-run library. We're a non-profit organization focused on comics, their accessibility, and showcasing how incredible comics can be. Click. Okay. Originally we were located in Regent Park, but we had to move due to the Daniel Spectrum building kind of shutting down and changing. And we now reside in the annex on the 4th floor of the Bathurst and Bloor Center for Social Innovations. You can visit our website at canadacomicsol.org to view our projects, blog, and other online comics resources. Myself and CCAL would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee, that Huron-Wendat and that Indigenous peoples have lived on and cared for this land for more than 15,000 years. This territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Treaty. Today, Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the settlers of the land directly benefit from the process of colonization. It's a big goal that we're trying to always work towards and be the most welcoming place we can be. And if anyone has any ideas on how we can further our goals in prioritizing Indigenous comics, please let us know if you have any leads on interesting Indigenous comic creators. It's so much stuff out there and it's so hard to wade through everything without direction sometimes. Anyways, again, thank you for attending this online event of ours as the continuing COVID-19 pandemic persists to not allow us from hosting events in our physical library space. Hopefully one day we'll get to do that, but for now, we're stuck on the screens. I just want to preface this by saying that I don't consider myself a professional, and some of the ideas I'll be mentioning in this talk have worked for me and might not work for everyone, as everyone progresses differently along their own paths. I'll also be speaking using a lot of metaphors, memories from my life, and maybe abstract thoughts and comparisons, so bear with me. I've never done a workshop lecture like this before. It's totally new to me, so I'm pretty nervous, but thanks so much for coming again. And this subject is something that I've been thinking about for a long time, so I look forward to discussing things with you, with everyone. If anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. I'm going to try to coordinate like that. If you want to say something and I'm not noticing how you're saying, like, I want to say something, just interrupt me. I won't be offended. It'll be more conversational, and sometimes I can see things easily and other times I cannot. So yeah. Also, I encourage everyone to doodle away while I'm rambling on. I've always loved drawing in class when lectures were happening, and it sort of helped me tie drawings to memories and stuff like that. Anyways, what else? So yeah, let's get started. I did this little slideshow this morning, and I'm going to share my screen. All right, so cartooning as potential energy, something I've been thinking about a long time. The first time I really felt connected to comics in any way was in the summer of grade 9 after being introduced to webcomics by classmates. My father clipped Far Side from the newspaper. Far Side's like a gag comic by Gary Larson. And my mom was a huge For Better For Worse fan. I'm pretty sure she has the whole collection. That's by Lynn Johnson. And man, I read this Lynn Johnson strip this morning. It just made me bawl. It's like, no wonder I don't read this stuff. It's too emotionally intense for me. It's just bouncing back and forth between screens. But like comics have always been around in my life. Like my uncles were really big collectors of superhero comics, Marvel comics. I remember them all being sold at yard sales in like these big old long boxes. And it was always really fascinating to me, these drawings that were in these boxes, in these little squares. And like there was an appeal to them, but there was also a very big like unappeal to them. Like the content was lacking for me personally. Like there was something that was enjoyable about them, but I never really fully like started to realize how amazing comics are until webcomics had a big impact on my life. And I wonder why like I wasn't interested in these. Is it because like I was so fond of video games growing up? Like here's some shots of video games that I loved playing. It's like glowing pixels on a screen are really accessible for the eyes of children, and like they're really attractive. And I don't know, maybe that's why when I started to like really fall in love with comics, they were all coming out of a screen, all web comics, all going to like really specific websites. These games, in case anyone's curious, we have NES Tetris, Super Mario Brothers 2 in North America, and Bubble Bobble. I love those games. They're all fun as hell. Yeah, so I started to read webcomics. These were the ones that interested me first. Overcompensating and Wigu by Jeffrey Rowland, which is in the top left corner there. Questionable Content by Jeff Jacks. The middle comic is Perry Bible Fellowship by Neil Gerwich. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And Bunny Comic by Lem. Like these comics, I would visit these websites every day, like really excited to see what new content was being created by these people, and was just shocked at like how could these individuals be creating work weekly or even daily that I'm able to relate to so much. It was the first time I'd ever really felt that with comics before. So by the end of the summer, after like falling in love with these writers and cartoonists, I began working on my first comic strip. Always wanting to write, but never feeling like a good writer, which was just judged based upon the grades given to me by my teachers in the subject of English. It's something I always wanted to do, but never had courage to do so, I guess. The want to do something, but told you're not good at it, it's really crushing and defeating. And I got a lot to say about the school system, so I'm going to stop there. Anyways, what does all of this have to do with potential energy? To begin, I would like to talk about the word cartoon, and specifically its etymology. What does the word cartoon mean to you? Like for the majority of my life, it was synonymous with animation. As a child, I remember being briefly confused to learn that animation and newspaper comics were both cartoons. That is like calling a movie a photograph, is it not? And I suppose it is in some way. How little did I know, and how little I still know for that matter. Yeah, so there's some things like when I was growing up, this is what a cartoon was in my head. Like we've got The Simpsons and Fantasia. That's what a cartoon was to me. Yeah, upon researching the etymology of the word cartoon using the internet, I found very similar results via different sources, and we'll use this quote from Merriam-Webster's online because why not? This use of cartoon dates to the 1600s, when the Italian word cartone, originally meaning pasteboard, was borrowed into English. Carton comes from the same Italian root, also borrowed into French with the spelling carton. And though it is most commonly used to mean a box made of cardboard, it originally meant the material cardboard itself in English as in French. The related word card dates back to the 1400s in English and came through French from the ultimate Latin root charta, meaning a leaf of papyrus. Charta is also the ancestor of chart or charter. Also, cartoon, noun, in painting, a design drawn on strong paper to be afterward caulked, rubbed through, and transferred on the fresh plaster of a wall to be painted in fresco. That was a little wordy, but like when I first read that, I was like, that's very far removed from animation, like, and what I considered what a cartoon was. And I first looked it up about 8 years ago after I got a job selling art supplies. This was because I never connected with the word artist, and suddenly working at an art supply store, I was being assumed and called one pretty frequently, and it didn't feel right. In response to such comments, I would often say I just draw comics, and began thinking of what a cartoonist was. And for whatever reason, that word resonated in my brain much more frequently than that of the word artist. I think very differently about that now, but that was how I was feeling at the time. And how different cartoonists are from artists, but that's kind of BS because cartoonists are artists. And that's just wordplay in the end. So the word cartoon comes from that of something that is not yet in its finality, but meant to be polished into something else. I mean that by before cartooning became refined into an art form, which we think of it as today, it was always intended to be something else and never its final form. This is where the potential energy of cartooning comes into play. If one was not to draw the cartoon, the final painting could not have been produced. How many major Hollywood blockbusters are stemmed from an individual cartoonist? So what is potential energy? There's some pasteboard and cardboards and boxes, and those are cartoons right there, which is hilarious to me. Let's go back a little bit here. Potential energy. Here are some stock images of what Google thinks potential energy is and how they're illustrated. We see this little biker on the top left, and energy's going in. Potential energy is reached when they're at the top of the hill, and then energy goes out and they're zooming down the hill with a lot less, like they don't need to put any more energy into it. It's happening on its own, so to speak. So the act of pushing a boulder up a hill is an easy way to express what potential energy is. When the rock is at the bottom of the hill, it is stagnant and stationary, having no energy inputted into it. The rock will remain in place. Sorry, I just have to share, these are what artists are to Google, and stock images of what artists are. Like, those are the first three, really. And I think that's just so funny and stereotypical and great. Anyways, and I followed that up with this book by Seth. I think this was one of the first comic books that I bought that was really like, whoa, this is really beautiful artwork. Like, I've never seen anything like this. And Seth talks endlessly about what it is to be an artist and what it is to be a cartoonist and stuff like that, to the point of a little bit irritation to me. But my God, when I first saw these lines and these colors and all of that, it just made me feel so good. So anyways, back to what about potential energy and the metaphor of pushing a boulder up a hill. So if nobody, let's read my script here. When the rock is at the bottom of the hill, it is stagnant and stationary, having no energy inputted into it. The rock will remain in place until an outside energy source begins charging it up. If someone were to come along and attempt to push the boulder up the hill, the amount of energy that they need to do so gives the boulder the potential to move on its own. Upon reaching the pinnacle of the mountain, the boulder would have gathered quite a bit of potential energy, but who is to say what will happen upon creating said energy? It's just sitting there at the top of the hill, waiting for something. Who knows what? Who knows where it will go? Until that final push occurs, be it by the one who pushed it up the mountain or by another outside source, its energy remains dormant, but all the hard work has been done. Once the boulder does get that push, its potential is expressed in the form of it rolling down the hill all on its own. I just want to switch to Zoom, make sure nobody's in the waiting room here. No, good. So yeah, these are, that's why I drew this poster for this talk of, there's me pushing like the boulder up the hill. That's my character Fret drawing me pushing the boulder up the hill. And practice and failure is like such an important part of like progress and life and all of that stuff. That's why I put arrows in those words next to me. Yeah, so where are we here? This metaphor can be used in the form of cartooning in a few different ways. But before I get to further diving into this, I'd like to mention the idea of success and what a pinnacle in comics looks like, and suppose in life in general. There's some nice snowy images of boulders, rocks, and railroad tracks. We'll talk more about those in a second, but here's success. These are some business successful people and humorous things to me. Success in the world of cartooning for me has always been making comics first and foremost. If I make a comic, I feel like I've succeeded. That's what success is to me. It's very different than big money success that is kind of, I don't know. Anyways, what success means to an individual varies greatly depending on an infinite number of factors attributing to worldview. Success in the world of cartooning for me has always been making comics. I don't imagine many people started making comics for the money, but often see success in the industry being equated to dollar bills and fat stacks of cash. Yeah, I wonder how many cartoonists started comics because they're like, there's money in comics. I'm gonna make comics to make money. It's like, it doesn't sound like very smart thinking, but I don't know. Who am I to say? Some people are so good at doing business, and they could, like Disney and Stan Lee and those guys. They're such good businessmen, and I don't want to like say what they did is a bad thing or not or whatever. It's just I always felt differently. And I asked Google, like, who is the most successful cartoonist of all time? It was no surprise that it was Walt Disney. And I suppose this is what the majority considers success. Lots of fame, lots of fortune. But for me, success comes in many different forms, and the pinnacles that I'm attempting to reach constantly change. So potential energy as it pertains to cartooning. When does a story begin to create potential energy? Let's go back to these pleasant photos of snowy and rocks and railroad tracks instead of corporate stuff. I suppose it often starts in somebody's head and heart. That is, when does a story begin to create potential energy? For some, this urge is enough to begin pushing the boulder up the storytelling mountain, but unsure what path their story will take, while others see a straight line to the top of the mountain. Different amounts of energy are required for every individual. For years, I struggled with understanding how to keep momentum with my cartooning. It often felt like for every shove I gave the boulder, I would slip down and have to catch up once again. Is this wasted energy? How do we make the most of the potential energy that we are creating? Firstly, although it felt like the boulder was slipping away on me, I do not think this was wasted energy. Imagine a snowy slope, if you will. The first time a boulder were to be pushed up the mountain would feel very difficult, having to clear a path in the snow. With every failed attempt of making it to the top, the snow would get more and more packed down, and a path of least resistance would be formed. Familiarizing yourself with the landscape and the feelings. This is like stuff I think about all the time in metaphorically speaking, and also in reality. Like, I walk on a set of railroad tracks by my house all the time. We've been getting tons of snow lately. Every time I walk that path, I'm creating a path. Some days that path stays there and I'm able to walk again smoothly, while the next day it will be covered by the dust of the snow that the train pulls by. And that's like just how I feel like a lot of how life goes. You gotta like constantly be like, expect something to work the same every time, I guess. I don't know what I'm saying. Anyways, the more I talk to cartooning folks, the more I realize how different everyone approaches the boulder and mountain, which is making comics. It took me years to realize the most efficient routes to the top of the mountain, and I'm sure I will find clearer paths in the future. A lot of people will suggest that there's a proper order to drawing comics. First use scripts, then thumbnail, put some pencils down, and lastly ink before sending off to the printers. This is a path that many successful cartoonists take to make the mountain of work that they are able to do. Let's see what some other images we got. Okay, go back here. So yeah, on the note of like momentum and comic making and stuff like that, this is the 2 pages on the screen right now are like 2 pages I drew over 10 years ago, probably. And these 2 pages alone took me like months and months, probably 6 months, for no reason other than obsessing over pencils. Like, a path that I tried to walk along many times was the same one that was set out by many cartoonists before me, which is script, pencil, ink. But penciling, man, penciling drove me insane. Like, every time I would start penciling, it would be like a vertical wall that I would hit. It was like, it was never good enough. Like this, which is a funny thing about cartooning, because it's like, how can I describe this? Like, the act of penciling is almost like you're making a cartoon for the cartoon before you cartoon, if that makes any sense at all to you guys. I hate penciling. It drives me completely bonkers with perfectionist attitude, which results in no comics being made. Penciling and potential energy really do go hand in hand to me. If somebody puts the energy into penciling something for me, that they have done so much potential energy, and then if I get it and I can ink it, it feels like nothing. Like it's so much more enjoyable, and like they've done the potential energy, and now I'm just pushing the boulder off the edge and enjoying the inking process, so to speak. So this is the end of the script that I had. Now I'm just going to show examples of kind of like how I progressed through art and how I ended up making a pinball machine and building weird other projects from like being obsessed with cartoons. Just gonna check Zoom again. Is there anyone in the chat? Let's see what's good. Chatty chat. Yeah, cartoon. I know, and I try to read it a lot and think about it. The corn dog guy, especially. Yes, a cartoon for a cartoon before you make the cartoon. Yes, yes. Thank you, Shao. So back to this guy. And like these were fun pages to draw. They're kind of like they don't mean anything. They just sit there in my portfolio, and I've never published them or anything. Yeah. Anyways, boom. This is how I started drawing comics, aside from me doing web comics, which I've completely gotten rid of all of them from the internet. When I was in high school, I made like these high school comics called Eli comics, and I did my very best to just delete them as much as I can. I can't find them anywhere, so that makes me feel great. But then after I started seeing what zines were and all of that stuff, it's like, oh wow, people are making printed comics on their own as well. It's like, not only are these people making web comics, and like that's really cool, and like you're able to publish them digitally and stuff, but like somebody once showed me like a mini comic that was like just a crappy fun zine, and I was like, wow, I could do that. That's like hella inspiring. I want to make zines. So I started doing that. I guess the first one, I think it says July 2008. I called it Basin. I'm from Sudbury. Sudbury's a big crater. It's a big hole in the ground. It's like a bowl that people get stuck in. You kind of climb. It's really funny talking about metaphors and thinking about Sudbury and Basin, because it took me a long time to like push the ball out of the hole, which is like these comics, these Basin comics. And I haven't published one in a long time, but I was making these for quite a while. I want to talk about the bottom right corner, Basin Comics issue 9. That cover means like a lot to me because I was working on this page and I was really liking how it was coming along, like the comic behind the fret and the splash of ink. Like loved how it was looking and was nearly finishing. And then my cat came and spilled like my jar of ink on it, and she like ruined the page effectively. And all of what I thought of my energy was wasted. Like, oh, I just spent like 4 hours on this fucking page. Like, now it's destroyed. stupid cat. Like I lost that cat on my birthday a couple of years ago, and I ended up drawing Fred over top of like the ink that she had spilled, and it's like a big collaborative project with my cat. And tearing up thinking about it, but like that's kind of what I mean by potential energy. It's like she did some of the boulder pushing for me without me even realizing it. And how much of life is like that? How can we think of every experience as not a failure, but or like a measure of success or failure? Why is that even such an important thing to talk about? Failure is often painted negatively, and I guess I'm trying to paint it positively. Especially, it can be very defeating, of course. Anyways, this is the 10th issue of Base that I made. I thought instead of doing like, hey, Rob's here, let's get this guy in, admit. Yeah, so like for the 10th issue of Baseline, I was just wanted to do something fun and different. Like I was thinking about making something really big, but instead I just went super tiny, built these little tables. This was probably my first like stepping away from traditional zine making and into a world of completely bizarre zines that I dream about. Like, I don't know, I guess it's been done a lot, like the whole Seinfeld coffee table book on coffee tables. It's like, that's a bit that I've heard about for years, but I was like, I'm gonna build a coffee table and put a book on it and staple it right to the wood. And I think I made like 6 of these, and that's how I released my 10th issue of Basin. It was fun as hell. they're all broken too. Like I think 2 of them just snapped because the wood is such a low quality like box or what do they call it? Boxwood? No. Anyways, so that's 10 tissue basin. I then like really realized how I like to draw comics, and I started drawing my Don't Fret series in 2016, and I drew 1 panel a day straight to ink for 2.5 years. This was like, I felt so good drawing these comics. It was easy. Like every day I would open up my sketchbook, quickly pull out my brush pen, bang out a panel in an hour or 2 or 3, depending on how much detail my brain obsesses at that day. And it worked for me so nicely. Like it was really fun to just produce this amount of work in a fast time. However, there's a lot of it that annoys me when I look at it because of how sloppy some of the drawings are. Oops, let's go back. Once again, I want to check the zoom. At least you got a giant nickel, exactly. Thanks, Jade. Yeah, and so like that was the path that I found the easiest. Like I found this version what I considered success, and I just wanted to make comics, and I was sick of not making comics, so I just wanted to just do it. And like it can be scary to like make bad work and judge yourself for it and stuff like that, and understand like being self-critical and stuff like that. So yeah, that's some of this. And I've made this little box in the bottom left corner which I store all of these zines in. And just when I was making this presentation, I realized like that is a cartoon which holds cartoons. If I'm using the etymology of, if I'm using like old English or old language, anyways. So all of those like book covers were paintings. I painted all of those book covers. There's one behind me, and I was lucky enough to have an art show at the Beguiling. Like I feel blessed that they hung my work on their walls. Like I feel so fortunate, so lucky. It was a big undertaking. It was just really fun. It was like I was working at an art store, was getting inspired by all these artists who were like making big paintings, and I was like, man, that looks fun as hell. Like that looks like really fun to do. Like just move my body around and use color in a wild way instead of black and white. So I started to throw color onto these canvases, and they all produced like this. And the first 4 or the first 5 paintings were 3 feet by 3 feet. Then the next 5 were 2 feet by 2 feet. Then the next 4 were 1 foot by 1 foot. And for the last one, the last cover, I didn't do a painting. I made this like sculpted head of fret, which I painted and made like a little prison room and took a photograph and did some lighting. Yeah, bottom right corner is how that looks on print. That was fun to make too. Like, I don't know, art's weird. We like to box ourselves sometimes, or at least I always did. Like for years, it's like, oh, I'm a cartoonist. That's what I am. I'm not an artist. Like, screw you guys for calling me an artist. Blah 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 blah. Then I went to like a Gary Panter talk at OCAD once. He was just like doing this free to attend for everyone talk. And Gary Panter's like a classic cartoonist from the 60s and painter and artist. He did a lot of Pee-wee's Playhouse design of some of the figures back when that was a thing. He's like super multidisciplinary. And I knew his comics before I knew anything else. So I always like associated him as a cartoonist. But when he was talking, he says like, no, I'm a painter first, and then I'm a writer, and then I'm a sculptor, and then I'm a cartoonist. And it just kind of was really eye-opening to me. Like, wow, how can this man be so many things? And like all I know is just the cartoon work. Like how can I strive to be more like that? Anyways, more multidisciplinary. So yeah, after I finished all those 12 books, I was like, I'm gonna bind these into a hardcover series. I made 50 of these books, screen printed the cover onto canvas fabric, cut out a whole bunch of little pieces of cardboard to wrap it around, cut a whole bunch of paper, folded a whole bunch of paper, sewed a whole bunch of paper, glued them into the spines. It's like 240 pages or something like that. I made 50 copies. I'm never going to do it again. It was really fucking annoying, and my hands were really painful after gluing so much. I went through like 6 bottles of massive weld bond. It was just ridiculous. Like, ugh. But I'm really happy with the result. Like, it was a struggle to make these things, and it was for TCAP, and they're like some of my Like, I'm really proud of this book, but it was not fun to make. Yeah, then I started making scrolls, because the reason why I laid out the book and all of these zines vertically and not in a traditional way is because I originally put them on Instagram first, and I wanted to mock how we scroll things, because I think the vast majority of content and what we read now is in like this vertical associative way instead of this normal book way. So made those books like that. Then made my hardcover book like that. And then I was watching a lot of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Like, I went through the whole series, fell in love with it, really love that show. I think it's one of the best things. Thanks, Vincy. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Jeez, this is nice words. Back to my keynote here. Yeah, watching tons of Sabrina. Like, I loved it so much. It inspired me to not draw Fred anymore, because I drew Fred for 2.5 years. He's my favorite character. He's my OC, they call it, original character. And I could draw him endlessly. But yeah, instead I was like, I'm gonna draw Sabrina fanzines. I've never made an actual fanzine before, which is like when you fanboy and fangirl out to shit that you love and make fun of it and have fun with it. So yeah, I started doing Sabrina the Teenage Witch comics. I made 6 10-panel watercolor comics, full color, and then I printed like 6 of these scrolls or something like that. I don't have the first one, I only have the second one, and yeah, that was super fun. So again, trying to push what a zine is. I still consider this a zine. I still consider my hardcover book a zine, because they're all just like these handmade things. But that's wordplay and can be discussed at any real time. So what happened after that? Then I started screen printing a lot, because I made my book cover. I have this friend named Emma Delanerol. They make like amazing screen printed sweaters and like swag of these falling people. He calls it Falling Series, and he was working like really hard on this body of work for like years. I think he's finally like stepping away from it. But man, that guy inspired me. I wore his stuff all the time, and it's like, I just want to wear my own things and enjoy things. So these are some images I made on one sweater that I'm wearing. The sleeve is the book spine, is like the design I put on my book spine. Fret in Mew form. Mew is like a Pokemon that has some significance to me because of what a mysterious entity it was, and how much like fun and like play I had with a kid, and like, or as a kid. Oops. Oop. Sorry about that. Oh shoot, we're all lost. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so that's why I made Fret Mew. And then the back is like inspired by my partner Jen, who I would like not be cartooning if I was not with her, probably, because she's fucking insanely talented and like super inspiring. And the back image is just like, it's just how I feel about Jen, and like I just made that image for her. And I don't really like selling this kind of stuff because they're really personal to me, and I'd rather just be one of the only people in the world who gets to wear it. It's just how I am. Okay, so now we're getting to the end of like my cycle of an artist and my progress through what I want to make. And now I'm making pinball machines because I love pinball. I have fallen in love with pinball over the past 1.5 years, 2 years, 3 years, or whatever. I don't know. When did we start going to Tilt? Like 10 years ago? Like I would go to these arcade bars to play the arcade games, like not the pinball games. But then recently I started to like think about pinball more, and just like, wow, what are these machines? Like, how do you play these games? And if you know anything about pinball, every one is different, and they all tell little stories as you play the games. They're really weird forms of play and fun. So, and my mom like mentioned like just in passing that she wanted a pinball machine for her house, and I was like, oh, weird. Like, I guess I'm gonna start looking these up, and like, how much do pinball machines cost? They're really, really expensive, like way more than I thought they would ever be, even used ones. So I was like, oh, we'll scrap that idea. I'm gonna try to find like a bar top one, like a tabletop pinball machine that I could just give her and put it on her bar. And I went into so many stores, I couldn't find one. I was like searching for like a week, couldn't find one. And then I was just like, fuck it, I could build one. I know I can do this. I'm confident enough. I know like I've like put all of this energy into my art, and I know I can like do this if I imagine it hard enough, because I just like try to power myself up. And I built this thing and like built and designed it in 8 days because I wanted it to be done before Christmas time. And I pulled an all-nighter and I got really unhealthy because of it, but it was super fun. And this is like the prototype of my flipper. This thing was so fun to build. It looks like crap. I just had all of these pieces lying around my house, and I just started drilling and moving things around and just trying to understand mechanics and brainstorm. I did a lot of sketching too, lots and lots of rough work on paper first, tons of cartoons. Before I could ever make something like this, I would need to cartoon it first. Almost every project I do, if it's anything in the physical world, I'll draw it, I'll make a cartoon of it, and then you can build it. And that's the potential energy that cartooning has itself. Cartooning is behind so much design, and I don't think most people would even see it like that. Like an architectural drawing is a cartoon for sure. But is it? I don't know. Who's to say? The words change, as we can see by etymology. That's why I love studying etymology. It's like, I looked up the etymology of the word business, and it comes from anxiety. And it makes so much sense. Like busyness, like when you're full of busyness, you get anxious. It's like, oh no, like this is too much to handle for one person. And I found that fascinating. Yeah, so now I'm doing pinball business, and it's making me all anxious, and I'm having a great time with it. And here's the finished result. I'll play this quick video. It's like 10 seconds long. On the left, there's a little photo of like the machine just sitting there without the glass on top, and then I threw the glass on top. I'll play this. Here we go. Here's a little round of pinball. I didn't have a proper scoreboard, so I just used D20s, 20-sided dice to like mock score in a random way. Terrible round, only 10 seconds, but yeah, that's the pinball machine I built for my mom, and I went crazy. And now I'm obsessing about these things. It's like, oh no, I want to make my next comic a fucking pinball machine. Like I want to make a comic book pinball machine so badly, and like it's gonna take me all year probably, but I'm super excited about it. Big project. And yeah, I guess lastly, I just want to talk about inspiration. Like we're like kind of going back to like comics and web comics, thinking about that, and where does all this inspiration come from? And it's like, oh, I love collecting, I love reading, I love art, I love music, I love film, all that stuff. Just feeling good about things that I like, even if it weirds me out and creeps me out sometimes. This is like some of my comic book collection. These are some of the books I read. But forms of inspiration continue to come in weird ways in different unexpected places. Skateboarders are like some of the most impressive humans on the planet to me. Like I love skateboarding and I suck at it because I'm really scared of it. And some people, they just rip, and like the potential energy that skateboarders like have to expect, or like, oh, skateboarders, they're so inspiring to me. I love them. And yeah, I guess that's about that.